On a sun-scorched stretch of Texas highway in the 1960s, destiny prepared an impossible script. A twisted wreck, a trapped driver, a passing motorist who stopped to help. And then, through the haze of pain and gasoline fumes, came words that would blur the line between celluloid and reality forever. I know you. I just saw you die 100 times. Sometimes, God writes with a pen so fine, even Hollywood couldn't imagine the ink. This is Hollyweird Stories. There are heroes, and then there are heroes. The difference, friends, is measured not in the brightness of the spotlight, but in the darkness where no spotlight shines at all. Audie Murphy knew both kinds of darkness. Born in 1925 in a sharecropper's shack near Kingston, Texas, young Audie understood hardship before he understood the alphabet. One of 12 children, he picked cotton for a nickel a day while his father drifted away and his mother's health crumbled like the dry earth beneath their feet. When she died, Audie was just 16. He became father and provider to his younger siblings, though he was barely more than a child himself. Then came December 7th, 1941. Audie Murphy tried to enlist the very next day. The Marines rejected him, too short. The paratroopers turned him away, too light. Finally, the Army took a chance on this 5'5" wisp of a Texas boy who lied about his age and looked like a strong wind might carry him off. Nobody expected much from Private Murphy. They should have known better. What happened next was the kind of story that strains belief. In the European theater, this baby-faced kid from Hunt County became a one-man wrecking crew. He earned every major combat award America could give, including the Medal of Honor. He killed 240 enemy soldiers. He single-handedly held off an entire German company while wounded and standing atop a burning tank destroyer, directing artillery fire through a field telephone as machine gun bullets chewed up the metal around him. Newspapers called him the most decorated soldier in American history. But that decoration came with a price invisible to medal counters. After the war, Audie Murphy came home with what they didn't yet call PTSD. He slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow. He suffered nightmares that made him wake up swinging. The demons he'd faced on frozen European battlefields had followed him home to Texas, uninvited guests who never left. Hollywood noticed the war hero with the movie star looks. In 1955, Universal Studios released To Hell and Back, based on Murphy's best-selling autobiography. Audie played himself, recreating his own nightmares for the camera, reliving the friends he'd lost, the fear he'd conquered, the impossible odds he'd faced. The film made him famous all over again. Suddenly, America's greatest war hero was also a Hollywood leading man. He starred in westerns and action pictures throughout the 1950s and 60s. Not all were masterpieces, but they paid the bills and kept him working, kept him moving, kept him one step ahead of those demons. Now fast forward to 1967. A hot afternoon on a Texas highway, somewhere between where dreams begin and where they sometimes end too quickly. Audie Murphy was driving, heading where doesn't matter now, when he saw something that triggered instincts honed in 100 battles. A car had left the road. Most people slow down and look. Some people stop and stare. A precious few actually do something. Audie Murphy didn't hesitate. He pulled over and ran toward the wreckage. Smoke was rising from the crumpled vehicle. Inside, a man was trapped, injured, conscious but fading. The smell of gasoline hung heavy in the air, that distinctive, dangerous perfume that promised fire and gave no warning of when. Murphy had seen men burn in tanks. He'd heard their screams. That wasn't going to happen here. Not today. Not while he could do something about it. He worked at the twisted metal with his bare hands, pulling at door frames that had become modern sculptures of destruction. The math was simple and terrible. Gasoline plus heat plus time equals catastrophe. Murphy pulled harder. Finally, the man came free. Murphy dragged him to safety, away from the wreck, away from the danger. Only then did he check to see how badly the stranger was hurt. The man was staring at him, not with the blank stare of shock, but with something else. Recognition, wonder, disbelief. "I know you," the man said, his voice thick with pain and amazement. "You're Audie Murphy." Happens all the time to movie stars, right? Someone recognizes you, wants an autograph, tells you they loved your last picture. But what the man said next sent shivers down Murphy's spine. "I just saw your movie," the injured man continued. "3 days ago. To hell and back. I watched you save all those men, and now you just saved me." Stand back from that moment and see it clearly. A man watches a movie about a war hero's real-life exploits. 3 days later, that same war hero, now a movie star, pulls him from a burning car. The film had ended with Murphy's character surviving impossible odds. Now Murphy himself was ensuring another man's survival. Life imitating art, imitating life. Murphy didn't think of himself as a hero that day. By all accounts, he rarely thought of himself as a hero any day. When people called him one, he'd point to the men who didn't come home, the ones whose names were carved into marble memorials instead of movie posters. Those were the real heroes, he'd say. He just happened to survive. But here's what Audie Murphy understood that others often miss. Heroism isn't a role you play when cameras are rolling. It's not something you turn on for crowds or turn off when you're alone. Real heroism is a reflex, a moral muscle memory that kicks in when someone needs help and you're the one who can give it. On that Texas highway, there were no cameras, no director yelling action, no script to follow. Just a man who'd spent his youth pulling friends from burning metal in foreign fields, and who couldn't drive past burning metal on a home highway without stopping. The man Murphy saved that day lived because of what happened in those few minutes. But he'd also lived because of what happened years earlier in foxholes and tank battles across Europe. Because those experiences had forged a man incapable of driving past someone in need. The story doesn't end there, of course. It never does. Audie Murphy continued acting, continued struggling with his demons, continued being human and flawed and complicated. He spoke openly about his PTSD at a time when such honesty could end careers. He became an advocate for veterans' mental health, using his fame to shine light on invisible wounds. On May 28, 1971, Audie Murphy died in a plane crash in Virginia. He was just 45 years old. They buried him at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. His grave remains one of the most visited in that hallowed ground. But somewhere, there's a man who lived because a hero couldn't stop being heroic, even when the war was over and the cameras were off. A man who'd seen a movie about impossible courage and then experienced it firsthand from the very same person. That's the thing about authentic heroism. It doesn't need an audience to perform, and it doesn't need a script to know what's right. Audie Murphy played himself in To Hell and Back because nobody else could capture what he'd really been through. But on that highway in 1967, he wasn't playing anybody. He was simply being who he'd always been. A man who saw someone in trouble and helped. No cameras required, no applause necessary. Just one human being refusing to drive past another human being in need. The man he saved knew he'd been rescued by someone special, but he didn't know the deeper truth, that he'd been saved by someone who couldn't be anything other than a hero, whether on a European battlefield on a movie screen, or on an anonymous stretch of Texas highway where fate and fortune collided. This is Hollyweird Stories.
Special thank you to Hollyweird Shop for making this episode possible.
Check out Hollyweird.shop. They've got the perfect items for the true movie fan. Dare to be different and unleash your weird. Hollyweird.shop unveils new designs every week and is now offering great shipping deals. Stand out, creep out, and wear your weird. Shop now at Hollyweird.shop.